Hi, I'm Belinda, and welcome to Storytime with Belinda. Here, every story has a heartbeat, and each one is made to connect with you. Whether we're exploring a far off land or talking about something close to home, I hope you find a little piece of yourself in each tale. Let's get started, and thank you for being here. Monsters of Myth, the terrifying tales of the Vrykolakas and Lamia. Throughout human history, myths and legends have served as a means to explain the unexplainable, often giving rise to creatures that embody the deepest fears and anxieties of their time. These myths are more than just stories. They reflect the cultural, social, and psychological landscapes from which they emerge. Among the myriad of monsters that have populated these tales, the Vrykolakas and Lamia stand out as two of the most terrifying figures in Greek folklore. The Vrykolakas, a vampiric revenant, is a grotesque figure associated with death and disease, while the Lamia, a monstrous seductress, preys on children and men alike, embodying the fear of unchecked desire and female power. The tales of these two creatures not only offer a window into the ancient Greek understanding of life and death, but also reveal enduring themes that continue to resonate in modern narratives. The Vrykolakas and Lamia are not merely relics of a superstitious past, they have evolved over centuries, influencing contemporary horror and fantasy genres. By delving into their origins, characteristics, and cultural significance, we can uncover why these myths have persisted and how they continue to shape our collective imagination. This video will explore the myths of the Vrykolakas and Lamia, comparing their roles in ancient Greek culture and their transformations over time. It will examine how these figures symbolize the fears of their eras, from death and disease to desire and destruction, and why they remain powerful symbols in storytelling today. Through this exploration, we will better understand the ways in which monsters serve as mirrors to our most profound fears and desires. The Vrykolakas is a figure deeply rooted in Greek folklore, though its origins are thought to have been influenced by Slavic mythology, where similar vampiric and werewolf-like creatures appear. The term Vrykolakas is believed to have been derived from the Slavic word Varkolak, which refers to a wolf-like monster, hinting at the creature's hybrid nature. Over time, the concept of the Vrykolakas evolved within the Greek cultural milieu, integrating local beliefs about the dead and the supernatural. This amalgamation resulted in a unique folklore figure, distinct from the more refined vampire archetypes of Western Europe. The Vrykolakas thus became a distinctly Greek version of the Revenant, embodying fears of death, decay, and the unknown. In traditional Greek lore, the Vrykolakas is described as a bloated, ruddy corpse, often grotesque and terrifying in appearance, quite different from the pale, elegant vampires of later European literature. This creature was believed to rise from its grave and roam the earth, particularly at night, preying on the living. One of the most peculiar behaviors attributed to the Vrykolakas was its method of knocking on doors and calling out the names of those inside. If the person answered, they would be struck by a fatal disease or be taken by the creature. The Vrykolakas was thought to be especially dangerous during certain times, such as during plagues or when the community experienced unexplained deaths. The creature's nocturnal nature, combined with its association with disease, made it a powerful symbol of contagion and the unknown threats lurking in the dark. The Vrykolakas became a convenient explanation for sudden deaths, particularly in rural communities where medical knowledge was sparse. During times of epidemic, the fear of the Vrykolakas surged, and elaborate rituals were developed to prevent the dead from returning as these feared creatures. To prevent a corpse from becoming a Vrykolakas, certain practices were often employed, such as placing a cross or sharp objects like nails in the coffin, or burying the body with its mouth filled with stones to prevent it from calling out. In some extreme cases, the bodies were exhumed and various post-mortem actions were taken, including the removal of the heart, which was then burned to ensure the spirit would not rise. The fear of the Vrykolakas was not only about the physical threat it posed, but also about the disruption of the natural order. In a culture where proper burial rites and the sanctity of the grave were deeply important, the idea of a corpse defying these rites and returning to torment the living was profoundly disturbing. The Vrykolakas serves as a potent symbol of the fear of death and the unknown. It encapsulates the anxieties surrounding mortality and the afterlife, reflecting societal efforts to understand and control what lies beyond death. Furthermore, the Vrykolakas myth can be seen as a cultural response to inexplicable tragedies, a way to cope with the randomness of death and disease by attributing them to supernatural forces. In modern times, the Vrykolakas has influenced the development of the vampire mythos, although it retains its distinctive characteristics in Greek folklore. Unlike the romanticized vampires of later literature, the Vrykolakas remains a terrifying, grotesque figure that underscores the horror of death and decay. Its legacy continues to permeate horror stories and films, serving as a reminder of the enduring power of ancient fears in shaping our narratives about the supernatural. The Lamia is a figure of profound horror in Greek mythology, with her story deeply intertwined with themes of beauty, desire, and vengeance. According to myth, Lamia was originally a beautiful queen of Libya, renowned for her stunning appearance and charm. She became the mistress of Zeus, the king of the gods, which inevitably drew the wrath of Hera, Zeus's jealous wife. Hera's vengeance was particularly cruel. She cursed Lamia to devour her own children, a punishment that drove Lamia to madness and transformed her into a hideous, child-eating monster. Over time, the myth of Lamia evolved, with various versions adding layers to her tragic and terrifying character. In some stories, Hera's curse also deprived Lamia of the ability to close her eyes, forcing her to endlessly see the horrors she had committed. The god Zeus, moved by her suffering, granted her the power to remove her eyes at will. In other versions, Lamia's transformation includes physical changes that make her even more monstrous, often depicted with serpentine features, combining elements of human and snake. Lamia's characteristics vary across different accounts, but common themes include her dual nature of beauty and monstrosity. Initially, she retained her human form but was cursed to prey on children, consuming them in a grotesque and terrifying manner. This predation made Lamia a figure of fear for ancient Greek parents who used her story to scare children into obedience. In later myths, Lamia's depiction becomes more monstrous, with her lower body taking on a serpentine form, further enhancing her association with the primal and the terrifying. Despite her monstrous appearance, she retained her seductive powers, using her beauty to lure unsuspecting men. Once entrapped, her victims would face their doom, as Lamia revealed her true form and consumed them. Lamia's insatiable hunger and her predation on children link her to themes of maternal loss and the fear of female autonomy. As a monstrous mother figure, She inverts the nurturing role expected of women, becoming a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked female power and desire. The story of Lamia served several cultural purposes in ancient Greece. On one level, it was a cautionary tale warning against the dangers of infidelity, desire, and jealousy. Lamia's transformation from a queen to a monster reflected societal fears about women who defied conventional roles, particularly in the context of motherhood and sexuality. On another level, Lamia's myth was a way to explain sudden infant deaths or unexplained child disappearances, attributing these tragedies to the actions of a supernatural predator. This narrative provided a sense of control over the incomprehensible, offering a scapegoat in the form of a monstrous figure. Additionally, Lamia's association with serpentine features and her dual nature of beauty and horror tied her to broader mythological themes about the danger of illusion and the unpredictability of the natural world. Her story intersected with other myths that portrayed women with serpentine traits, such as the Gorgons, emphasizing the fear of the unknown and the monstrous feminine. Lamia symbolizes the fear of feminine power, particularly when it diverges from societal norms. Her story reflects anxieties about female sexuality and the destructive potential of desire, encapsulating a fear that beauty and seduction can mask monstrous intentions. In this way, Lamia becomes a symbol of the dangers of unchecked desire, both for those who fall prey to her and for herself, as her monstrous fate is a direct consequence of her relationship with Zeus. In modern interpretations, Lamia's legacy continues to influence horror and fantasy genres. She has appeared in various forms in literature, films, and art, often representing the duality of attraction and fear. Stories of beautiful but deadly women can trace their roots back to Lamia, making her an enduring figure in the cultural imagination. Lamia's tale also resonates with contemporary discussions about the demonization of female autonomy and the fears surrounding maternal failure. In modern retellings, her character can be seen as both a victim of divine cruelty and a warning against the subversion of traditional roles, highlighting her complexity and the enduring power of her myth. The Vrykolakas and Lamia, though distinct in their origins and behaviors, share several thematic and symbolic similarities. Both creatures are deeply entrenched in the supernatural, serving as embodiments of fear, death, and the unknown. They operate primarily in the shadows, preying on humans in ways that reflect ancient anxieties about the vulnerabilities of life. One notable similarity is their association with nocturnal activities. The Vrykolakas prowls the night, knocking on doors and spreading disease or death to those who unwittingly answer. Similarly, the Lamia, though not strictly a nocturnal predator, often attacks under the cover of darkness, stealing children from their beds or seducing men with her beauty before revealing her monstrous form. This shared nocturnal nature emphasizes the ancient fear of the night as a time when the boundary between the natural and supernatural becomes blurred. Both figures also embody the concept of predation on humans, albeit in different forms. The Vrykolakas preys on entire communities by spreading plague and death, while the Lamia's focus is more personal, targeting individuals, specifically children and men. This predation serves as a reminder of humanity's fragility in the face of the supernatural and the unknown. Despite their similarities, the Vrykolakas and Lamia diverge significantly in their nature and the specific fears they represent. The Vrykolakas is a creature born from death and the grave, a physical manifestation of the fear of the undead and the corruption of the natural order. It is grotesque and physically repulsive, symbolizing the terror of decay and the unknown consequences of death. Its connection to disease and death reflects a societal attempt to understand and control inexplicable mortal dangers, such as plagues. In contrast, the Lamia, while also monstrous, retains an element of tragic beauty. Her origins as a once beautiful queen cursed into monstrosity bring a humanizing element to her story. Unlike the Vrykolakas, whose horror is rooted in physical decay and the spread of disease, the Lamia's terror lies in her seductive and deceptive nature, as well as her role in child predation. This aligns her with psychological fears surrounding beauty, desire, and the betrayal of trust, particularly maternal instincts. Furthermore, the methods by which these creatures prey on humans differ significantly. The Vrykolakas' attacks are often impersonal, linked to spreading disease and causing unexplained deaths. On the other hand, the Lamia's attacks are intensely personal, focusing on individual victims, which adds a layer of intimacy and betrayal to her terror. The Vrykolakas and Lamia symbolize different aspects of ancient fears and anxieties, yet both reflect broader cultural concerns about life, death, and the natural order. The Vrykolakas, as an undead creature, symbolizes the fear of death's aftermath and the corruption of the body. It embodies the terror of what happens when the dead refuse to stay buried, turning into a plague upon the living. This reflects a deep-seated fear of the unknown aspects of death and the potential for the dead to return, disrupting the balance between life and death. Lamia, by contrast, symbolizes fears related to the feminine and maternal aspects of life. Her transformation from a beautiful woman into a monster represents the dangers of unchecked desires and the fear of powerful, independent women. She is a cautionary tale against the excesses of beauty and seduction, as well as the loss of maternal nurturing, turning instead into a predator of children. In this way, Lamia can be seen as a symbol of the dark side of female autonomy and power. Both the Vrykolakas and Lamia have left an indelible mark on cultural storytelling, reflecting the fears of their respective eras while continuing to resonate in modern narratives. Their enduring presence in folklore and popular culture demonstrates the universal and timeless nature of the fears they embody. The Vrykolakas' influence is seen in the evolution of the vampire myth, where the fear of the undead and their impact on the living remains a compelling theme. Meanwhile, Lamia's tale continues to inspire stories about the monstrous feminine, the duality of beauty and horror, and the dangers of succumbing to desire. By examining the Vrykolakas and Lamia together, we can see how myths about monsters serve as reflections of the collective fears of a society, offering insights into how different cultures confront and cope with their anxieties about death, the supernatural, and human nature. Although the Vrykolakas originates in ancient Greek and Slavic folklore, its legacy has evolved over centuries, influencing modern depictions of vampires in literature, film, and television. The creature's vampiric qualities, its nocturnal activities, ability to spread disease, and predatory nature bear strong resemblances to the modern vampire mythos, which began to take shape in the 18th and 19th centuries with works like Bram Stoker's Dracula and continued in contemporary vampire-themed media. The Vrykolakas shares key traits with many modern vampires, especially in its transformation from a corporeal, human-like form into something monstrous. In popular culture, particularly in works like The Vampire Chronicles by Anne Rice, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and The Vampire Diaries, vampires are often depicted as undead creatures who blend into society while preying on humans. The idea of the Vrykolakas being a supernatural, vampiric revenant who causes illness and death by infecting others echoes this portrayal, with an emphasis on the vampire as a parasite that spreads its curse through physical interaction. However, the Vrykolakas' specific association with death and disease, particularly the idea of a creature that spreads plagues, has been reflected in modern apocalyptic and zombie genres. Films like 28 Days Later and TV shows such as The Walking Dead focus on creatures that infect others with a disease or curse, spreading death and chaos across communities. These stories often draw on the fear of an uncontrollable, unseen infection that mirrors the Vrykolakas' nocturnal role as a bringer of death. Thus, the ancient myths of the Vrykolakas have found new life in the viral and infectious elements of modern horror. Moreover, the Vrykolakas' grotesque and horrific appearance has also influenced more recent portrayals of vampires as monstrous figures. While early vampire stories often depicted their supernatural subjects as elegant and sophisticated, modern depictions, such as those in the Twilight series or the 2008 film Lamia, sometimes revert to a more monstrous or grotesque form, reminiscent of the Vrykolakas. This aligns with the earlier, more terrifying aspects of the vampire myth, emphasizing the creature's vampiric nature over its human veneer. The Lamia's influence is equally enduring, particularly in stories that involve the concept of the monstrous feminine, a term used in feminist theory to describe the ways in which women are portrayed as dangerous or threatening through their sexual power, maternal instincts, and transformation into literal or metaphorical monsters. Lamia's role as a seductive, child-eating creature has been reflected in various modern horror films, novels, and media, where the idea of the deadly woman or femme fatale is central to the plot. In films such as The Hunger, 1983, The Addiction, 1995, and Drag Me to Hell, 2009, the Lamia's essence lives on in the form of seductive female characters who lure men into dangerous situations or transform into monstrous beings with deadly intentions. These characters often exploit male desire, turning it into an instrument of destruction. The Lamia's supernatural powers, her ability to both enchant and consume her victims, are key components in these films, where female characters are depicted as both beautiful and horrific, invoking fears of female sexuality and autonomy. Furthermore, Lamia's symbolism as a predator of children has made its way into modern horror, particularly in works that deal with themes of maternal fear and child loss. In films like Mama, 2013, and The Others, 2001, maternal figures face the terrifying prospect of losing their children to supernatural forces, reflecting the deep-seated fears of Lamia's myth. Fears of a maternal figure who is both nurturing and terrifying. These modern interpretations emphasize the duality of Lamia's character, the potential for a woman to be both nurturing and destructive, challenging traditional ideas of femininity and motherhood. Moreover, Lamia's transformation from a beautiful queen to a monster, driven by jealousy and rage, aligns with contemporary themes surrounding the dangers of unchecked desire, power, and beauty. In stories like Gone Girl, 2012, and Fatal Attraction, 1987, Women who have been wronged or rejected become monstrous figures driven by obsession and vengeance. These modern narratives reflect the Lamia's mythological roots, where a woman's transformation into a monstrous being is a direct consequence of her desire for power, vengeance, or fulfillment of her needs at all costs. Both the Vrykolakas and Lamia have influenced the way modern horror and supernatural narratives explore death, disease, and the role of women. In many ways, these myths serve as cultural responses to societal fears about death, sexuality, and power, fears that have not only persisted but evolved in contemporary storytelling. The Vrykolakas, with its horrifying association with disease and death, taps into contemporary fears of contagion and pandemic. The rise of zombie and apocalyptic genres, which often feature creatures that spread death or infection, owes much to the ancient figure of the Vrykolakas, whose curse was passed through proximity to the undead. In today's world, where pandemics, viruses, and unseen dangers feel ever present, the Vrykolakas represents the primal fear of disease that cannot be controlled. Lamia, on the other hand, remains a potent figure in discussions about the monstrous feminine. Her enduring legacy in modern films, literature, and television highlights societal fears surrounding women's power and the dangers of female independence. The Lamia continues to serve as a cautionary tale about the destructive potential of unchecked desire, sexual power, and maternal loss, fears that are central to many modern narratives. Both figures, despite their ancient origins, continue to captivate audiences, adapting their terrifying qualities to reflect the anxieties and desires of each new generation. Their influence is woven into the fabric of modern horror and fantasy, ensuring that the monsters of myth remain as relevant today as they were centuries ago. The enduring myths of the Vrykolakas and Lamia continue to captivate our imaginations, centuries after they first emerged in ancient Greek folklore. These figures, while rooted in cultural contexts vastly different from our own, remain relevant in contemporary discussions about fear, death, desire, and the supernatural. Through their monstrous forms, they address timeless anxieties that transcend generations, evolving in meaning and form as they are reinterpreted in modern media. The Vrykolakas, with its association to disease, death, and the corruption of the natural order, taps into deep-seated fears about the fragility of life and the unknown consequences of the afterlife. As a creature that disrupts the boundary between the living and the dead, it echoes our modern fears of pandemics, contagion, and the uncontrollable spread of harm. From ancient plagues to modern apocalyptic narratives, the Vrykolakas' influence is apparent in the evolving depictions of creatures that bring death through infection, embodying a fear that remains as potent today as it was in ancient Greece. Meanwhile, the Lamia's story is one of transformation, of a woman turned monstrous by vengeance and cursed with an insatiable hunger for children and men. Her myth encapsulates the fear of feminine power, beauty, and desire gone awry, a theme that continues to reverberate in modern culture. The Lamia's monstrousness, both in her seductive nature and in her maternal destruction, reflects fears of the dangers inherent in unchecked female autonomy and the complexities of sexual power. This fear has been reimagined in contemporary media, with the Lamia's influence apparent in a recurring trope of the femme fatale and the monstrous mother figure, who operates outside societal expectations and wreaks havoc in her wake. These two mythical creatures, though distinct in their characteristics and symbolism, share an essential role in the exploration of human vulnerability, whether to death, disease, or the dark side of human desire. Their ability to evolve and adapt over time underscores the timeless nature of the fears they represent. As modern horror stories continue to tap into the primal and often uncomfortable themes that these myths embody, they offer insight into our collective psyche and our ongoing attempts to understand and confront the unknown. The stories of the Vrykolakas and Lamia remind us that monsters are more than just terrifying creatures. They are reflections of our deepest anxieties, representing the dangers we fear but cannot always explain. As such, these myths continue to serve as powerful vehicles for storytelling, providing timeless symbols through which we can explore the complexities of life, death, gender, and human nature. The lasting presence of these figures in popular culture ensures that the Vrykolakas and Lamia will remain cornerstones of folklore, fear, and the supernatural for generations to come. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I hope you had as much fun as I did. If you love this one, make sure to hit that like button, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss a new tale. Got a story idea? Drop it in the comments below. I'm always looking for new adventures to share. Until next time, stay curious and keep telling your own stories.